Jimmy Fallon. Now, he has, I know we've spoken about him before, we may not agree with his politics or whatever, but he's now been accused of having a toxic work environment. He's been accused of being drunk on set, being aggressive, treating people badly, that there's 8 showrunners in 8 years that have quit, and there's people coming out saying that there's all this bad stuff about Jimmy Fallon and all these challenges. Now, Jimmy Fallon responded. We talk about should you respond or should you not? Jimmy Fallon responded and he just said, "Hey, look, I'm sorry. The last thing I wanted is I want it to be a happy environment. I want it to be a positive place, an inclusive place for everyone. I didn't want anyone to be hurt." So I suppose there's accusations of being a toxic work environment. First thing, we spoke about this before. Do you come out? Do you not come out? Do you think it was right that Jimmy Fallon came out and apologised in this way?
If he'd come to me for advice, and why would he? But if he did, I'd probably say, look, this is something between you and those individuals. If you feel it's appropriate to apologise, then go and do it to them. Generally speaking, I wouldn't recommend that you do anything on social media. Honestly, because look, this is not a stage performance or anything like that. I just think it's really unfortunate that we tend to think that because somebody has a public profile, that they have to answer to all of us individually, and that somehow or other we're all supposed to, be part of this great voyeur show, and watch on and occasionally comment. Who knows? Look, again, we've got no idea. As social media observers, we've got no idea what the truth is. And you must never draw a conclusion either by the volume of comments one way or the other on social media. Honestly, because the cost of making a comment on social media is next to nothing.
Yes.
So people can say things and they've really got very little to lose. They've got no obligation to do any research or even to think carefully before they put finger to keyboard.
Yeah.
So as a general rule, I wouldn't recommend making a public apology. And in any case, as Brett Cooper noted and many others have noted, the apologies can go on and on and on and on. It's not going to make any difference.
Yes.
If the swell of public opinion on social media goes against you, it doesn't make any difference what you do. It's not going to make any difference. So the general rule would be keep it private. If you've got anyone you genuinely believe you should be apologising to, do it privately. Yeah. And look, if they choose to make something public, I guess that's their business and so on. But look, the media, as you know, it's a difficult job.
Yeah.
Very, very. I mean, to do a nightly TV show like Jimmy Fallon has done, I think they're not doing too much just now because they haven't got anyone to write the script. But we've talked about that before as well. It's high pressure. It's very difficult to judge the difference between a high pressure workplace that you go into with your eyes open and a toxic workplace.
That actually brings up a good point, because I wanted to ask you this, because what's the difference? Look, let's be honest. Both you and I, we've spoken about this at length, that we have previously both worked within toxic environments. We've both been under toxic leadership and all that sort of stuff. But I would understand, like you mentioned, like it's a late night show, and I'm assuming that stuff is really high pressure and it's on the ball. There's lots going on. There's a whole lot of pressure, a lot of people, a lot of contributing factors and moving parts and everything like that. I would say that it would be and you're dealing with a lot of egos and you're dealing a lot of different characters and everything like that. What's the difference between a high pressure environment versus a toxic environment?
Oh, it's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think it's something which is pretty difficult to make that demarcation. But I would characterise a toxic environment as one in which there is repeated behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you have a manager who loses his or her temper on a regular basis, and I'm talking here about, say, 3 or 4 times a week, that would, I think, point to a toxic culture. If somebody loses their cool maybe once a month or once every 3 months or something because there's a combination of things that go wrong technically, or suddenly a script isn't there, or, someone doesn't do their job properly and someone loses their temper. Look, I think, sure, there's an occasion perhaps to apologise, but I don't think that is a toxic work culture. The reason being, it's not culture.
Yeah. Yes. That's good. Because it happens doesn't mean it's the culture. It's a culture is when something is repeatedly happening, and it's right. Something that's embedded. And what you notice is that we talk about about culture. It all comes from the top, and it should flow on. And so, a culture doesn't mean that one person is getting upset. A culture, is everyone's doing whatever that culture is that you're talking about. So how do we as leaders make sure that, because we've all heard this before, a lot of leaders leading incredible organizations, and I know personally leaders, and I've worked with and for a lot of incredible leaders that are just chasing a massive vision, and they're running fast, and they're growing, and they're doing amazing things, and people just do get run over along the way. And a lot of them just kind of have this attitude of, well, whatever, like, if they can't keep up, then get off, like, kind of like they don't have the best attitude. But how do you, while running a fast-growing or a high-pressure style business, how do you find that? How do you make sure that high pressure doesn't turn into toxicity?
Well, you need to check yourself, and you need to be accountable to a small group of mature Christian people who are going to keep you into line. And I think one of the things that the kind of leader that you're talking about isn't very good at is building that kind of framework around themselves just to check their behaviour. So by nature, they don't want to do that sort of thing because they are so committed to the vision. Often, of course, they're absolutely certain that they've got that vision from God, and that God is going to hold them accountable for the outworking of that vision. But look, as a general rule, except in times of disaster and war, I just don't like that sort of what they used to call the heroic man view of leadership. I think leadership is better based upon building an appropriate team.
Yeah.
And for the leaders of the kind that you've discussed, we're generally not talking about crisis or war. We're talking about building a vision. Yeah. And when God is involved, he loves people. God is not desiring that people get hurt as we make that journey towards the fulfillment of the vision that God has given us. But I do think we have to be very wary of becoming the so-called heroic man type leader. Leaders do have to have vision, because if they don't have vision and if they don't enthuse those around them in terms of that vision, it will never be achieved, because God rarely gives somebody a vision that they can achieve on their own. I would counsel leaders to take time to build the right team. And the leader, the kind of leader you're talking about, I believe, but rarely has an appropriate 2IC. The role of the 2IC is critically important and is not talked enough about, is not researched enough.
Yep.
And I've seen it work well once or twice, but once or twice only.
Yeah.
The kind of 2IC has to be someone who doesn't have the same ambitions as the leader, because they've got to be absolutely looking after the leader's back, so to speak.
Yeah.
Not looking for opportunities to lead in the same way themselves, either to usurp that leader or to move on to somewhere else. It has to be someone, in fact, whom God has called as 2IC to that particular leader. And
Yes.
I'm sure those people are out there. But look, when you study leadership, if you do leadership as part of a Bible college course or a university course, you will very rarely hear the role of the 2IC even discussed. We focus on the leader all the time. And I think we probably do ourselves a disservice by doing that.
Yeah, that's really good. Building that team around, the right team around you is important, and having the right 2IC. And you're right, like the right 2IC is someone who could possibly do it by themselves, but doesn't have the ambition to do it by themselves. I think that's probably the crucial key. Another thing that comes to mind when we're talking about this high pressure / toxic environment, because I think it's only a natural progression that if it's a high pressure environment, it becomes toxic. And the one thing that comes to my mind is one of the strategies that we talk about a lot. And I know I haven't done a free plug for this for a little while. Free plug for our free leadership development program. Link in description. Go check it out. The JARI window of urgent, important. That I find that most of those leaders that are running high pressure organizations are all operating in that urgent, important quadrant. And that's the biggest mistake as leaders, that we are running in urgent, important rather than in the not urgent, important quadrant. And that go and look it up, the JARI window of urgent and important. You'll find it anywhere. Because we tend to, most leaders that are running fast, that are chasing a big vision, don't take the time to plan and prepare properly. They're usually visionary leaders. Those are the types of leaders that tend to create a high pressure environment around them, and everyone's on the back foot because they're just constantly trying to chase the next big idea that the leader has. And that's when leaders are operating in that urgent and important quadrant. When we're operating in that urgent or even the urgent side of the JARI window, then we're always going to have high pressure because everything's urgent. Everything's last minute. Come on, we've got to meet this deadline. However, if we as leaders operate in the important but not urgent quadrant, where we're focusing on the important things, we're prepared and we're doing them early enough. Now, it doesn't mean that nothing becomes urgent, because sometimes emergencies happen. Sometimes things break down. Sometimes a client will come and say, I need this now. But if everything else is in the urgent, important quadrant, then that's how you burn out your team. That's how, in a high pressure business organization team, we get burnout. That's how it becomes a toxic environment, because we're always operating in that urgent, important quadrant. And then when another urgent, important thing comes up, that's almost like, as they say, the straw that broke the camel's back. So we as leaders need to focus on how do we operate more in that urgent, not important quadrant. So we're working on things early enough, we're prepared enough, planned enough. And as Dr. Rod mentioned earlier when we were talking about one of the other topics, is getting the right team around you. Because when you've got the right team around you, they're able to efficiently and proficiently do things in time, rather than everything being, maybe there's too much work for a team to do, and that's why everything's urgent. So we need to be very careful of creating that toxic environment by creating a constant high pressure environment. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.